Chapter 9 of the Boxcar Children. Fun in the Cherry Orchard. The next morning, Henry thought and thought about taking the other children to pick cherries with him. At last he told his sisters about it, and they all ate bread and milk for breakfast. Dr. Moore said he wanted some more children to help. "Do you think it's okay if all of us could go, Jessie?" "Well," said Jessie, "I don't know. You see, there are 4 of us. If Grandfather's looking for us, it would be easier to see 4 than 1. "Yes, that's so," answered Henry. "But we can go down the hill and through the streets 2 by 2. I'll take Benny and go ahead, and then a little while you and Violet can come with the dog." "Good," said Jessie. "Watch can tell us where to go." The children took down the clothesline and shut the door of the car. Everything was in order. Then they started out. When they arrived at the orchard, they soon saw that they were not the only workers. The doctor was there, and the cook, and 2 men carrying ladders and baskets. "Good morning, Henry," said Mrs. Moore. "Can you work today?" "Oh, yes," said Henry. "These are my sisters, Jessie and Violet. They can pick cherries too. Benny is too young to climb the tree, but we had to bring him." "Maybe he can carry baskets," said Dr. Moore, smiling at Benny. "You see, this is a big cherry year, and we have to work fast once we begin. Maybe he can help fill the little baskets from the big ones." "Eat all you want," said Mrs. Moore. "The cherries are beautiful this year." The children didn't eat all they wanted, but every now and then a big red cherry went into someone's mouth. Henry and the girls went up the ladders and began to pick cherries. Watch barked for a while. He didn't like to have Jessie climbing the ladder. Then he sat down and looked at her up in the tree. Benny hurried here and there, carrying baskets to the pickers and eating all the cherries he wanted. Everyone in the orchard liked Benny. The doctor laughed delightedly at him, and sweet Mrs. Moore fell in love with him at once. By and by he sat down beside her and carefully filled small baskets with cherries from the big baskets. The men laughed at the funny things that Benny said, and Watch barked happily. By and by the doctor left the orchard to make some calls. At last Mrs. Moore said, "I never had such happy cherry pickers before. You are having such a good time out there. I don't want you to go home." She smiled. Mary the cook seemed to think the same thing, for she came again and again into the orchard. After a while the cook went in to get dinner, but the children still picked cherries. At noon Dr. Moore came home. "You must stay to dinner," he said to the children. "We can eat here in the orchard under the trees. Will your mother be watching for you?" When he asked this, he looked at Henry in a strange way. Henry didn't know what to say, but at last Jessie said, "No, our mother and father are dead." "Then you must stay," said Mrs. Moore. "Here comes Mary." The cook put a table under the trees, and they all sat around it and ate a delicious dinner. Then Mary went into the house and came out again with big bowls of cherry dumplings. "I can smell something good," cried Benny. "Is it cherries?" "Yes, my little dear," said Mary. "It's cherry dumplings." The cherries were cooked in the dumplings. Benny ate his cherry dumpling and then went to sleep with the dog for a pillow. But Henry and Jessie and Violet began to work again. Mrs. Moore looked out the window at them. "Just see how those children work," she said to Dr. Moore. "They are so polite, too. I wonder who they are." Dr. Moore said nothing. After a while he went out to the orchard. "You have worked long enough," he said. He gave them $4 and all the cherries they could carry. "That's too much," said Henry. "No," said Dr. Moore, "it is just right. You see, you are better than most workers because you're so happy. Come again." "I'll come every day," said Benny. They all laughed. Dr. Moore saw that the children did not all leave the orchard at the same time, but started down the street 2 by 2. "I wish I knew who they were," he said to himself. When When the cherry pickers got back to their little home, they looked everything over carefully, but things were just as they left them. The door was still closed, the milk and the butter were in the refrigerator, and the children made a happy supper of bread and butter and cherries and went to bed in the boxcar. That same night, Dr. Moore sat reading the paper. All at once he saw the word lost and began to read. Lost, 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, somewhere around Greenfield or Silver City. $5,000 to anyone who finds them. Signed, James Henry Alden. Dr. Moore sat up. $5,000, he said. James Henry Alden. Oh my, oh my. He sat still for a long time, thinking and laughing to himself. The 4 children were living in a boxcar, but I shall not tell Mr. Alden that they are his grandchildren, he said. Chapter 10. Henry and the Free-for-All. James Henry Alden was a very rich man. His big mills stood just between Greenfield and Silver City. Here's the picture of Chapter 10, and a free-for-all is a great big race that anybody can be in. Now, James Henry Alden liked boys. He liked to see them run and jump and play. So each year, with 3 other rich men, he gave a field day to the town of Silver City, and even the mills were closed on field day. Every year the boys were in training for the races, and not only boys but men also, thin ones and fat ones, and girls trained for field day. There were prizes for all kinds of races, running and swimming and jumping. But the best one was a foot race called a free-for-all, because anyone could run in it. Mr. Alden gave a prize of $25 and a silver cup to the winner of the free-for-all. Sometimes a boy won the race, sometimes a girl. And once a fat man had won it. On field day, Henry was cutting the grass for Dr. Moore. Suddenly, the doctor stopped his car in the street and called to Henry. "Hop in," he said. "Today's field day. I want you to see the races." Henry hopped in, and the doctor started the car. "I'm sorry I can't go," said Dr. Moore, "and I want to know all about it. I want you to tell me who wins each race." Soon Henry found himself sitting in the bleachers. By and by, a small boy climbed up to the bleachers and sat beside him. Then a man called, "Free for all. Come and get ready." "What is that?" asked Henry. "A free-for-all?" "Don't you know?" asked the little boy. "Didn't you see the one last year?" "No," said Henry. The boy laughed. "That was a funny one," he said. "There were 2 men in the race and some girls and boys. That boy over there won it. You should have seen him. He ran so fast you could hardly see his legs at all." He looked at the winner of last year's race. He was smaller than Henry, but he was older. Suddenly, Henry stood up and quietly left the bleachers. He went to the room where the boys were getting ready for the race. "Do you want to run in the race?" a man asked him. "Yes, I do," replied Henry. The man gave him some track clothes to put on. "Where did you train?" he asked. "I never was trained," said Henry. "These boys have been training all year," remarked the man. "Oh, I don't think I'll win," answered Henry. "I just like to run. It's a lot of fun, you know." "So it is," said the man. "So it is." Henry could hardly wait for the race to begin. He loved to run. But at last the race was called. It was time to start. Henry was number 4. Now Henry began to think. "It's a long race," he said to himself. "I must go easy at first." The bell rang. Off went the runners down the track. In almost no time, Henry was far behind most of the other runners. But he didn't seem to mind this. "It's fun to run anyway," he said again and again to himself, and he tried to see how easy he could run. All at once he had another thought. "I have tried to see how easy I can run," he said to himself. "Now I will try to see how fast I can run." Then all the people began to see how fast Henry could run. He ran faster and faster, and soon he passed the two girls in front of him. And then he passed a man and a little boy. The people began to shout, "Number 4, number 4." Here was the kind of race they loved. "Faster and faster," cried Henry to himself. "I can run faster than this." He could. He passed number 25 and number 6, and then he passed number 5 and number 10. Only one runner was ahead of Henry now. It was number 16. Then Henry began to think of winning the race. He knew how much the $25 prize would mean to Jessie and the rest of the children. "I'm going to win this race," he said to himself. "I must pass number 16. He ran still faster. He could see the line at the end of the race. "Number 4, number 4, shouted the people. "He's going to win." When Henry was near number 16, he put his head down and ran as fast as he could. He passed number 16 and went across the line. He had won. The people shouted and shouted. Some men held Henry up high and carried him to Mr. Alden for the prize. Then a man asked, "What is your name, boy?" Henry didn't know what to say. He did not want to tell his name, so he answered, "Henry James." Now this was Henry's name, but it was not all of his name. At once the big sign said, "Henry James, number 4, winner of the free-for-all." "Here's the prize, Henry James," said Mr. Alden. "You can run well, my boy. I like to see you run." He gave Henry a silver cup and $25. Then he shook hands with him. Just then Dr. Moore came along and climbed up in the bleachers, but Henry did not see him. The doctor laughed to himself as Henry James shook hands with James Henry. At last Henry got away from the people and started back to Dr. Moore's. He had the $25 in his pocket. When Dr. Moore came home and found Henry cutting the grass, he laughed quietly to himself. "I just got home," said Henry. "I will tell you who won all the races." Dr. Moore did not tell Henry that he had been up in the bleachers. He let Henry tell him all about the races. "And who won the free-for-all?" he asked. "I did," said Henry. "You did," cried Dr. Moore. "Well, good for you. What are you going to do with that money?" "I will give it to Jessie," answered Henry. "Good," the doctor said again. When Henry arrived at the boxcar with the $25, he found dinner ready. Jessie had boiled the rest of the vegetables and put butter on top. The children began to eat, but hungry as they were, they stopped when Henry told them about the race and showed them the silver cup. They were so excited they couldn't eat. "You won the race, Henry?" cried Jessie, delighted. "Oh, I'm so glad." "You can run fast, Henry," said Benny. "I'm glad you won the race, too." He looked at the silver cup. "I said my name was Henry James," said Henry. "That's right," said Jessie. "So it is. You didn't really have to change it." "Are we rich now, Henry?" asked Benny. "No, not very," said Henry, laughing. "By the way, I brought something for supper." Jessie looked in the bag. There were some fine, fat, brown potatoes in it. "Oh, I know how to cook these," cried Jessie happily. "They will be good. You just wait." "I can't wait," said Henry, laughing. Then he went back to work. After dinner, Benny played around with the dog. "Benny," Jessie said suddenly as she hung her dish towel up to dry, "it's high time for you to learn to read." "No," said Benny. "No school now." Jessie laughed. "No," she said, "you can't go to school, but I can help you. I wish I had a book." "We could make a book," said Violet. "We have all the papers left from the bundles." "So we could," replied Jessie. "But what could we use to make words?" "We could use a burnt stick out of the fire," said Violet. So Jessie put the end of a long stick into the fire and burned it black. Then she used the burnt end to make words. "Won't Henry be glad when he finds Benny can read?" cried Violet. Now Benny did not want to learn to read, but he liked to watch the girls make the book. Jessie made the words she, me in the book, and then she called Benny. But he could not tell C from me. Don't you see, Benny, said Jessie. This one has an S. It says C. This one has an M. It says me. But Benny did not see. It is too hard for me, he said. I'll tell you, Jessie, said Violet at last. Let's make C on the paper and me on the other. That's the way they do it in school. Then have him point to C. The girls did this. They called Benny, and Jessie showed him again very carefully the word C. Then she put the two words down on the ground. Now, Benny, point to C, said Jessie. Benny looked at the two words. He couldn't tell. But Watch barked and put his paw on the word C. Now Watch did not know one word from another, but Benny thought he did. Was he going to let that dog get ahead of him? Not Benny. He looked at the words and learned them all at once. Good old Watch, said Jessie. It isn't hard at all, said Benny, is it, Watch? Before supper, Benny could read, see me run. I can run. Can you run? Good boy, said Jessie. Now I must get supper. The children started up the fire and washed the potatoes in the brook. Then Benny put wet papers around them, and Jessie put them in the fire under the hot stones. Are you going to burn them up, Jessie? Asked Benny. Oh, no, Benny, said Jessie. You wait and see. When Henry came home, he found Jessie rolling the potatoes out of the fire. They were very black. Oh, did you burn them up? Asked Henry. No, indeed, said Jessie. Come and see. She gave 3 black potatoes to each one. They are very hot, said Violet. Look out. Open them, said Jessie, and take the potato out with a spoon. Then put butter on top and some salt. I will get Benny's out. Well, how are they? Oh, cried Benny, they are delicious. What did I tell you, said Jessie. Have some milk. Milk and potatoes make a good supper, said Henry. I can read, remarked Benny. What? Said Henry. Yes, he can, said Violet. He learned this afternoon. Go and get your book, Benny. Benny liked to read now. It is not hard, he said. Watch can read too. Watch is too tired now, though, said Benny. I will read to you. Benny read out of his new book. Good old Benny, said Henry. Come to bed now. You must be tired with all that work. And I am tired too.